In the bustling heart of Washington, D.C., the federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation. High-profile cases were the norm here, but today's proceedings had an added layer of intrigue. The courtroom was packed with journalists, legal analysts, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors swung open and in walked Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary under President Donald Trump. Known for her articulate briefings and unwavering composure, her presence in a courtroom was unexpected. Whispers rippled through the audience, speculating on her role in the day's events. The U.S. Sun. Judge Samuel Thornton, a seasoned jurist with over 3 decades on the bench, presided over the court. He adjusted his glasses, peering down at the docket before him. The court calls the case of the United States versus the Department of Health and Human Services. The case in question revolved around a controversial executive order issued by President Trump, aiming to restructure significant portions of the healthcare system. Critics argued it overstepped executive authority, while supporters claimed it was a necessary reform. Representing the administration was Solicitor General Mark Davidson, a formidable figure in legal circles. However, to everyone's surprise, Davidson stepped aside, allowing Karoline to approach the lectern. A murmur of disbelief echoed through the courtroom. Judge Thornton raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. "Ms. Leavitt, while I'm familiar with your work at the White House, I wasn't aware of your legal credentials." Karoline met his gaze steadily. "Your Honor, I hold a degree in politics and communication from St. Anselm College. While I am not a practicing attorney, I have been authorized to present the administration's position today." A chuckle escaped from one of the opposing counsel's team members. Judge Thornton's smile widened. "Very well, Ms. Leavitt. Proceed, but be advised, this courtroom operates on the rule of law, not public opinion." Unfazed, Karoline nodded. "Understood, Your Honor." As she began her argument, it became evident that her lack of formal legal training was no hindrance. Drawing upon her extensive experience in policy and communication, Karoline presented a compelling narrative intertwining legal precedents with the administration's vision for healthcare reform. She referenced specific clauses from the Constitution, historical cases, and prior executive actions, all while maintaining a clear and concise delivery. The initial skepticism in the room gradually shifted to attentive interest. Judge Thornton leaned forward, his earlier amusement replaced with genuine curiosity. "Ms. Leavitt, your argument suggests that the executive order aligns with both constitutional provisions and historical precedent. However, how do you address the concerns regarding the potential overreach of executive power?" Karoline paused, allowing the question to resonate. "Your Honor, the separation of powers is a foundational principle of our republic. This executive order was crafted with meticulous attention to that balance. It seeks to enhance the implementation of existing laws passed by Congress, not to create new legislation unilaterally. Furthermore, in times of national need, the executive branch has historically exercised its authority to ensure the welfare of the populace, as seen in cases like Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the most seasoned legal professionals found themselves nodding in acknowledgement of her points. As Karoline continued, she deftly countered the opposition's arguments, anticipating their points and addressing them with precision. Her ability to distill complex legal concepts into relatable terms was a testament to her communication skills. By the time she concluded her presentation, the atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed. What began as a spectacle had evolved into a profound demonstration of intellect and poise. Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses once more, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Ms. Leavitt. Your insights have been enlightening." As she returned to her seat, Karoline couldn't help but reflect on the journey that led her here, from her days at St. Anselm College to the White House press room and now the courtroom. She had always believed in the power of preparation and adaptability, and today was a testament to that ethos. The following day, headlines across the nation blazed with Karoline Leavitt's unexpected courtroom performance. Pundits debated the implications, while social media buzzed with opinions ranging from admiration to skepticism. At the White House, President Trump called Karoline into the Oval Office. "Karoline, I saw the footage. Tremendous job. You took them by surprise." She smiled modestly. "Thank you, Mr. President. I felt it was important to convey our position effectively." He nodded. "Well, you certainly did that. But be prepared, the media will have a field day with this." Indeed, the press briefing that afternoon was packed. Reporters clamored for her attention, eager to dissect her courtroom appearance. "Karoline, do you believe your lack of formal legal training undermines the administration's stance?" one journalist asked pointedly. Next morning, the media landscape erupted with reactions to Karoline Leavitt's unexpected courtroom performance. Press secretary stuns judge with legal savvy. Karoline Leavitt, the unexpected star of the courtroom. Judge laughs, but who's laughing now? From conservative outlets praising her brilliance to left-leaning networks questioning her qualifications, the debate was everywhere. Cable news shows dissected every moment of the hearing, while social media exploded with clips of her dismantling the opposing counsel's arguments with poise and precision. At the White House, President Trump called her into the Oval Office. "Karoline, I saw the footage," he said with a grin, motioning for her to sit across from him. "Tremendous job. You really took them by surprise." She sat down, straightening her blazer. "Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to make sure our position was heard clearly." Trump nodded. "Well, you certainly did that. But listen, the press is going to be all over this. They'll say you're not a lawyer, that you shouldn't have been up there." Karoline met his gaze with confidence. "Let them. The facts speak for themselves." Trump chuckled. "That's why I like you. You don't back down. But be ready, the next press briefing is gonna be wild." Sure enough, later that afternoon, the White House press room was packed wall to wall with journalists itching to fire their questions at Karoline. As she stepped up to the podium, cameras flashed and hands shot into the air. She calmly scanned the room before calling on David Reynolds, a correspondent known for his sharp critiques of the administration. "Karoline, do you believe your lack of formal legal training undermines the administration's stance in this case?" he asked, leaning forward, clearly expecting her to stumble. She gave a small, knowing smile. "David, last I checked, the Constitution doesn't require a law degree to understand it. I didn't claim to be a lawyer. I presented the administration's case based on historical precedent, constitutional law, and executive authority. If my argument was weak, I'm sure the court would have dismissed it." Reynolds pressed on. "But the judge laughed when you first stepped up to the podium. Doesn't that say something?" Karoline leaned in slightly. "It says he underestimated me. But by the end of my argument, I think his reaction changed, don't you?" A murmur ran through the room. Even some of the more skeptical journalists smirked at her confidence. Another reporter, Lisa Tran, from a left-leaning outlet, spoke up. "Some legal scholars say your argument was compelling but not airtight. How do you respond to that?" Karoline nodded. "I'd welcome any legal scholar to debate me on the specifics. But at the end of the day, the court will make that decision. And given the history of executive authority, I think our case is solid." More questions followed, but Karoline held her ground, effortlessly batting back criticisms while staying composed. By the end of the briefing, even some of her harshest critics had to acknowledge. She wasn't just a press secretary. She was a force to be reckoned with. Online, the debate continued. Memes flooded social media. A side-by-side gif of Judge Thornton laughing at the start of the hearing and then listening intently by the end. A mock Karoline's law school sign with the tagline, "You don't need a JD, just facts and confidence." A viral tweet, "She walked in as a press secretary and walked out as a legal mastermind." Iconic. However, critics weren't silent either. Some accused her of being a political stunt, arguing that policy debates belong to legal professionals. Regardless of the side people took, one thing was undeniable. Karoline Leavitt had just changed the game. As the media firestorm raged on, Karoline remained focused on the court case itself. While she had stunned the judge and captivated the public, the legal battle was far from over. The opposing counsel, attorney Richard Callaway, a seasoned constitutional lawyer, was not about to let her moment of brilliance overshadow his case. The next court hearing was scheduled. Unlike the first hearing, where she had merely presented arguments, this time the court requested a follow-up, a deep dive into the legal foundations of the executive order. While the official White House legal team was still leading the case, Karoline was invited to return. But this time, Callaway came prepared. A few nights before the next hearing, Karoline was in her office when she received an unexpected message. "Karoline, are you watching?" It was from one of her colleagues in the communications department. Attached was a video link. She clicked it. A panel of legal experts on a primetime news show was discussing her performance. Most of them gave cautious praise, but one voice stood out, a Harvard law professor, Dr. Maxwell Brinton. She presented well, Brinton admitted, adjusting his glasses, but her argument lacked the depth required for true legal scrutiny. If she were up against someone like Richard Callaway in a formal setting, I guarantee she would crumble. Karoline's jaw tightened. She knew Callaway was one of the best constitutional lawyers in the country, but hearing it said so publicly only fueled her determination. She wasn't going to let anyone dismiss her so easily. Karoline dived into research, spending the next few nights working alongside the White House legal team. She wasn't just memorizing talking points, she was absorbing legal doctrines, historical precedents, and counterarguments. She watched every case Calloway had ever argued, studying his style, his strengths, and most importantly, his weaknesses. By the time the next court date arrived, she wasn't just prepared. She was ready to win. The courtroom was even more packed than before. The media had labeled this hearing the debate of the year. The White House press secretary versus a legendary constitutional lawyer. Calloway smirked as he adjusted his tie. "Ms. Leavitt," he said smoothly, "I have to admit I was impressed last time, but let's see how you handle real legal scrutiny." Karoline simply nodded. "Let's." The debate began, and as expected, Calloway came out swinging. "Your Honor," he said, addressing Judge Thornton, "this executive order dangerously expands executive power. It circumvents Congress, setting a precedent that could be exploited by future administrations." Karoline responded without missing a beat. "Your Honor, executive orders are meant to enhance congressional legislation, not replace it. As demonstrated in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer, an executive order is only unconstitutional when it directly contradicts existing law. This order aligns with previous legislative intent, making it well within presidential authority." Calloway raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected her to cite Youngstown so early. He changed tactics. "You claim precedent supports this order, but what about INS v. Chutta? The Supreme Court ruled that even well-intentioned executive actions can violate separation of powers." Karoline was ready. INS v. Chutta involved a legislative veto, an entirely different issue. That ruling struck down Congress's ability to override executive decisions without presidential approval. If anything, it reinforces the power of the executive branch in cases like this. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Calloway frowned. He had underestimated her again. By the time arguments concluded, Karoline had not only held her own, she had outmaneuvered Calloway on multiple points. Judge Thornton sighed, leaning forward. "I must say, Ms. Leavitt, when you first entered this courtroom, I assumed this was a publicity stunt." Karoline held her breath. "But after today, I see you as a formidable legal mind. Regardless of how this case proceeds, you've earned my respect." A wave of whispers filled the room. Even Calloway, though clearly frustrated, gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. As Karoline walked out of the courtroom, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and social media exploded. She had gone from underdog to a serious political force, and the world was watching. As Karoline stepped out of the courthouse, the media frenzy was at full tilt. Reporters pushed forward, microphones extended, desperate for a comment. "Karoline, how do you feel about the judge's remarks? Did you expect to go toe-to-toe with Calloway and hold your own? Is this the start of a legal career for you?" Karoline flashed a polite but firm smile. "I appreciate the judge's words, but this case isn't about me, it's about the integrity of the executive branch. The administration stands by this order and will continue to fight for it." Then, without another word, she strode past the cameras, her heels clicking against the pavement, knowing that Washington would never see her the same way again. Back at the White House, Karoline was met with a standing ovation from senior staff. Even members of the legal team who had initially dismissed her as a communications person now saw her as an asset. President Trump was especially pleased. "You crushed it, Karoline," he said, shaking her hand. "I mean, the judge?" He was stunned. "And Calloway?" He never saw it coming. She smiled. "Thank you, Mr. President. But we still have to see how the ruling plays out." Trump waved a hand. "Win or lose, you just made history." And he wasn't wrong. The next 48 hours saw an avalanche of political and media reactions. Conservative commentators hailed her as a rising star, calling her performance a masterclass in argumentation. Some even speculated about her future in politics. Liberal outlets, while still critical of the executive order, begrudgingly acknowledged that Karoline had exceeded expectations. A viral headline from a major newspaper read, "Karoline Leavitt, press secretary today, president tomorrow?" Republican lawmakers reached out, some suggesting she could take on a bigger role in policy discussions. Even Richard Calloway, in a post-trial interview, admitted, "I may not agree with her politics, but Karoline Leavitt is no lightweight." Behind closed doors, Judge Thornton reviewed the case. The legal question was complex. Did the executive order exceed presidential authority, or was it a necessary use of power? While the ruling hadn't been announced yet, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt had transformed the case into a national debate, one that had the entire country watching. And whether the judge ruled for or against, her performance had already changed her career forever. The nation held its breath as the ruling day approached. Legal experts debated endlessly on television, social media erupted with speculation, and every political commentator had an opinion. Would Judge Thornton rule in favor of the administration upholding the executive order? Or would he strike it down, delivering a blow to the White House? Meanwhile, Karoline remained calm. She had done everything possible to strengthen the case. Now, it was in the judge's hands. Then, at 10 a.m. sharp, the ruling was announced. Judge Thornton entered the courtroom and took his seat. The room fell silent. He cleared his throat and began reading the verdict. This case presents a fundamental question about executive power. The Constitution provides the president the authority to issue executive orders within certain limits, and it is the court's duty to ensure those limits are respected. Karoline's heart pounded. Then the ruling came. After careful deliberation, the court finds that this executive order does not exceed presidential authority and is therefore upheld. For a moment, there was pure silence, then an eruption of reactions. The White House team exchanged relieved smiles. Reporters scrambled to break the news. The opposition's legal team looked deflated. Callaway, ever the professional, gave a slight nod to Karoline as if acknowledging a worthy opponent. She had won. Not just the case, but something bigger, the respect of Washington's toughest critics. As she left the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning and microphones were shoved toward her. Karoline, how do you feel about the victory? Do you think this changes your career? She simply smiled and said, this ruling affirms what we already knew, the Constitution is clear on executive power. The court has spoken, and now we move forward. It was measured, professional, and strategic, exactly what was needed. The media frenzy didn't stop there. Within hours, her name was trending #1 on social media. Conservative voices celebrated her victory, calling her a future leader of the movement. Even some liberal analysts admitted she had played the case brilliantly. Then came the unexpected calls from political strategists, from donors, even from lawmakers whispering about a future Senate run. Was Karoline Leavitt destined for something even bigger? Back at the White House, Karoline walked into the Oval Office to see President Trump smiling. You did it, he said. Not just the case, you changed the way people see you. She nodded. It wasn't about me. It was about the Constitution. Trump grinned. That's why people like you. But let me ask you something. She raised an eyebrow. Yes, Mr. President? He leaned forward. Have you ever thought about running for office? Karoline paused. The question hung in the air. Then, for the first time, she seriously considered it. The legal battle was over, but Karoline Leavitt's story was just beginning. Would she stay in the White House, shaping the administration's policies? Would she take on a more prominent legal role, leveraging her newfound credibility? Or would she do the unthinkable, step into politics herself? One thing was certain. Washington would never underestimate her again.